Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their diverse stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you'd like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. On today's episode, Kelly Bron Johnson returns to Autism Stories to discuss being on a lived experience participatory research committee for a study on male and female healthcare trajectories in autism. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Well, it is a really good day for me because, Kelly, you have returned to Autism Stories. Any day I get to talk with you is a wonderful day. So thanks for returning.
Oh, thank you. Always happy to talk to you anytime.
Now, I wanted to have you back on Autism Stories because you always seem to be working on cool projects, and something you shared on social media recently I wanted to learn more about. And that is you're being on a lived experience participatory research committee for a study on male and female healthcare trajectories in autism. So are there any differences considering age at diagnosis and intellectual or developmental disability status? That's a really long title, but how did you and the Lived Experience Research Committee help guide this study?
So this is it's an interesting opportunity that kind of came across my lap, I guess. I had been doing, or I'm still actually on a participatory research committee with Dr. Brett Nachman, and he's based in the US. And so joining this lived experience committee was not like so new to me. This is what was new, or what was different, I guess, is the fact that it's a French study. It's a Quebec study. So I'm operating in my second language with everybody. So I'm probably not contributing as much as I would like. Maybe the convolution of the title is also because of the fact it's translated. It's people writing from French to English and trying to do their best. But at least the papers are written in English, so I'm reviewing in English, and I'm participating in French. So we've been pretty much from the beginning. We were asked to contribute in terms of the kind of questions, what were we going to be looking at. So at the beginning of the study, what we did know, and so it was led by Dr. Mélanie Couture, was that we got access to this giant database, essentially anonymized, from this period of time. And what did we do with it? Where do we go with it? What are we looking for? What's important? And so we were able to kind of guide some of those questions. We got some preliminary data that was coming out, and then we were able to kind of just keep moving things along. And even at the end, we ended up presenting that material to a group of autistic people to get more feedback and validation. And that was actually probably the coolest part of the whole experience. Out of everything, out of all the work that we did, was being able to validate what we came up with, and then kind of explore what we're going to do with it next.
I think there's always ways to make things more accessible. So in thinking about that, you mentioned that you participated in French. So I'm just kind of wondering, because I see sometimes on social media, for example, you'll post things in English and other times in French. Where do you think things are at in terms of support and resources for those that are not English speakers, maybe in French, for example?
So supports in Quebec, or in general, or
just in general, maybe resources or support.
Maybe that's a good question. I think if we're talking about just the Quebec environment, it's very loaded. It's a political question more than anything else. I know that I suggested a plain language version of the study, I actually, in this case, and the study is released in English, I actually don't know if it's going to be released in French. So it's one of those things where, the researchers are operating in their second language to make this happen, to make it more accessible for the rest of Canada, or the US or anybody, or internationally, whatever. That's an interesting, again, I think it's a hard question to answer, just because of the way that we navigate things in Quebec. Like and with language, is very loaded and very overly complicated in terms of, I think, providing access to each linguistic group. I don't know if I want to go into that one too much.
Well, what maybe we can go into is that the study looked at data from over 5,000 people and found that although physical and mental health challenges appear largely managed during youth, high hospitalization rates in those diagnosed in adulthood, particularly females and those with IDD, highlight concerns about continuity of care and avoidable hospitalization for these subgroups of patients. What might some things that you think could be done to improve continuity of care or transition planning for those diagnosed with autism, particularly females and those with intellectual disabilities?
So this is an interesting point. There's a couple of other factors, intersectional issues that are unique, or maybe not completely unique to Quebec. I would love to see this study replicated in other provinces so we can have a better idea. One of the factors that we see here is social economic issues. The other thing is that this particular study is looking at only when an autism diagnosis entered the public record. So, for example, people who get diagnosed privately, if they have chosen not to share that with a public medical professional at any point, and you're only going to see the point, or let's say if they do disclose it at some point within the public system, that's going to be the point of what's seen as diagnosis. It's not necessarily the point of diagnosis. But there is an issue in the sense of, yes, women, especially females, especially are taking longer to get the correct diagnosis. And they're typically diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, anxiety, or other things before getting an actual autism diagnosis. And that is also something that came out as a kind of a sexism issue in the medical field, where the doctors seem to be hesitant to put that word autism. There's so much stigma. They would rather diagnose a person with borderline, which is not, completely correct. And the problem too is that they were saying, some of the doctors were saying, well, we're hesitant to give a diagnosis of autism because we can't at that point help the person anymore. There's no treatment, there's no pills that are going to fix this. Whereas if you diagnose somebody with depression or borderline, hey, I can give you a pill for that. You might feel a bit better. In the case, many people are over medicated. They're not actually feeling any better. They're not getting anything out of these pills. And not to say there's anything against pills, but when it's the incorrect diagnosis, there are people who are suffering because they're being treated for things that they don't have. So the other issue, I think, is why you see people who have better outcomes in the sense if they've been diagnosed young. There's usually a social economic factor to that. So it's people who have more money, or perhaps it's more obvious. So they're able to get diagnosis earlier, and women and females will often be capable of masking to some extent until we melt down completely, we burn out. And so that's why you're seeing these higher incidences, like these higher complex issues at hospitalization or at a public service visit. I think the other piece that we have, especially in Quebec, that's particular, is we're not as proactive as we could be. So all of social services and a lot of healthcare is dictated by, is your house on fire? No, you're not. You're just kind of smoldering. Well, you'll just wait a bit till it gets worse, and then we'll help you. And so that's a lot of the, I think, the issue that we're having in that in our healthcare that reflects that.
Now, you already mentioned the study looked at those living in the province of Quebec, and it looked at those diagnosed as autistic from the years 2012 to 2015. And looking at this data, over 60% of people diagnosed with autism in adulthood in Quebec were diagnosed during a hospitalization or an emergency room visit. So essentially, I read this as people were most likely being diagnosed in potential moments of crisis.
Mhm.
What do you think it's important for clinicians to know so diagnosis is happening before there might be less moments of crisis?
I think one of the things that came out, especially when we had that validation session, was the idea that anybody who is diagnosing, any clinician who is diagnosing, needs to understand the value of the diagnosis. So, despite the fact that yes, we can give you a diagnosis with lots of stigma placed upon you, that's the fear. Again, it seems the doctors are very scared of this. That there's a value to that because it will reduce a lot of the other issues and a lot of the other chronic problems like the anxiety, the burnout. Um, and so even if you cannot, let's say, support a person with just the diagnosis, understanding that opens doors to other protective factors like government programs or support that they can use that will help prevent some of this, like I said, the fires burning and they end up in critical care, they end up in hospital because it's just gotten so much, or they end up with addictions or things like that because they are not able to cope. When you have the correct diagnosis, and you don't even have to share it with everybody. I don't know why these doctors are so concerned that like, oh, it's in their file, it says autism. Oh my gosh, it's interesting. So I mean, my diagnosis did not enter the public record until I would say almost like 6-7 years after my diagnosis, and it's in one particular place. I don't know if it spreads everywhere else. All that to say, it hasn't affected my treatment with any other doctor or dentist or anybody else that I go see. I think clinicians need to start to understand that there's a lot of value in just having the diagnosis in terms of having a preventative measure for preventing other crises, preventing people's mental health from getting worse.
And physical health, right? Because so many of us have chronic conditions that our autism impacts and vice versa. Now, this is the first study to compare healthcare trajectories using an intersectional perspective, examining the autistic population by sex, IDD status, and age of diagnosis. Hopefully, there's a lot more studies to address intersectionality and healthcare outcomes. So, what might be some specific things that you think might be helpful for hopefully many more of these future studies to focus on?
We can, again, looking at that social economic factor, the reason that people who are, if they don't have the ability to pay for the private system and get a diagnosis earlier, it's prohibitively, ridiculously expensive. I mean,
It is.
and so all those people are being left out and they're suffering in the meantime. They're not understanding why they are the way they are. They're not getting supports in school. They're getting ostracized. They're getting suspended. That really affects your ability to work later on. What we do know is that most of these kids, if they're not adequately diagnosed and or not adequately supported, that's a great way to fuel the school to prison pipeline. And so I would like, I would like this to be replicated in other provinces so we get a better idea what's happening in all of Canada. Healthcare is provincial, so it's different everywhere. It's different all across the country. And that idea of social economic status is important. I would probably add race as well. Um, we know also during the pandemic, there were different studies, not autism related, but on mental health. And there were greater mental health issues with the Anglophone male community in Montreal than the Francophone. And that's partly because of the lack of services available in English. So things like that need to inform the kind of services that we're going to continue to offer while the government continues to kind of want to strip back things, especially us with a minority language. And so focusing on the benefits of having a society and a workforce and that is healthy and capable to do things and to contribute and not be seen as criminals just because we've been misdiagnosed or wrongly diagnosed and left out and then imprisoned for being who we are.
Now, thinking about intersectionality, you've been my wonderful co-host on the podcast Intersections on the Spectrum. If our listeners haven't listened to any of those episodes, go to intersectionsonthespectrum.com and check those out. But, in thinking about that, what did you learn from kind of this experience as we have discussed, the entire point of that podcast was to discuss the impact of intersectionality on the autistic experience?
So what I've learned, and it wasn't directed at us. This is not an issue that we never received any sort of negative comments. What I have seen when there is a researcher here in Canada, Dr. Jonathan Weiss, who's been doing a lot of research on the intersection of race and autism. And so he posts the links for his studies up on Facebook and things. So you can see people commenting on it. And he's very specific about what he's asking for. He'll be asking for are you a family with an autistic person and South Asian descent? And he very, even to regions, he's getting very specific. and inevitably the comments go to, why are you doing that? What are you looking at that for? Like, how come you're not doing white people? And it's like, well, hello, we've been doing white people for forever.
We're always doing white people, and we continue to do white people.
So, why did we give the Southeast Asians a chance? I don't know. So I think what I've learned from that podcast experience is the fact that those spaces are still so needed. It shines a light, I guess, on the importance of it, to help people understand a little bit more of that experience. I was recently a guest on another podcast. It's not out yet, but I hope it all gets written up. But it was, she made a comment how her autistic son was so, so sweet and so open, and he just doesn't see race. And I just about lost my shit. So and I explained that it's important to see race. That this is an important part of our experience. Then there's a nuance to it. It's not the only aspect of it, but it needs to constantly be acknowledged because of the systemic issues that are surrounding it. I was in another meeting at some point where a white person looked at me and said, we don't have enough strong Black people here. And I looked at her and I said, which one is it? Am I not strong or am I not Black? and she goes, well, she started to say, oh, but you're mixed. And I'm like, but that's not for you to decide how I'm going to identify. So, I'm just saying, this kind of talk, this kind of discussions, they're important to continue to bring up, because as much as people like to say they don't see race, they do see race. We do see it. It does affect us. And we need a space for it. we need to make space for it.
Now, I started off our conversation today by mentioning you seem to always be involved in projects that I find interesting. Do you have any current or upcoming projects that you're excited to be involved with?
I have some books that I have written and quietly put out, and would love if people considered buying them. One is about quiet leadership. I call it that. It's about kind of how you don't have to be screaming from a megaphone to be a leader. I think it's a very autistic way of leading. I have my Kwanzaa book, Kwanzaa Every Day, that I came out in February, and I got it made as an audiobook very recently. So that's available as well. But I'm going to probably do more with that towards the holiday season. So I made sure, anyway, I always put these things out as much as possible as large print and ebook, audiobook if I can. But yeah, that's kind of what's happening there. And then I'm hoping to get some work. That would be nice. And I'm applying to grad school, but I'm not sure that that's something that's going to work either. But that's me. That's where I'm at.
Well, it's tough for me to finish books, but I would definitely be interested in reading some of your books. And lastly, how can our listeners learn or connect with you beyond this interview today?
So I used to say that people can find me everywhere. And now I've made boundaries. I probably do best being contacted on LinkedIn. I have a Facebook page, an author page. People can message me there, but I do not actually check those messages very often, so don't expect anything quick. My website has all my websites have a contact form. People can contact me through the contact form on my website. That's probably the most effective.
Well, Kelly, always a pleasure talking to you. You know, I've done over 400 plus episodes of Autism Stories at this point, and definitely one of my favorite things from this whole adventure has been getting to meet you and know you a little bit. So thanks so much for that.
Wow, thank you.
Thanks so much to Kelly for the conversation. To learn more about Kelly and the study on male and female healthcare trajectories in autism, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. We always love hearing from you and would especially love to hear from you relating to this episode regarding what do you think is most important for you and other people to understand about how intersectionality in autism impacts you. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to be the best version of their authentic selves through customized life coaching and community groups. We also support parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. So please visit autismpersonalcoach.com to begin your experience of judgment-free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.